Hey everyone, and welcome back to Too Lazy to Read.
Yeah, welcome back.
Today we're diving into a book that's been making waves for a while now.
It has.
It's called On Tyranny, 20 Lessons from the 20th Century by Timothy Snyder.
Yeah, a lot of people have been talking about this one.
Yeah, for good reason,
Yeah,
right? I mean, it's short, it's accessible, but it's packed with these really practical lessons about how to recognize and resist tyranny.
Which,
Based on what's going on in the world today,
yeah,
I feel like these are conversations we should be having.
totally agree.
So,
Especially for our listeners who are, thinking about their futures, building careers, starting families.
right, like how do we make sure we're creating the kind of world we want to live in, not just for ourselves, but for the next generation?
Exactly.
So, okay, let's jump right in.
Let's do it.
Snyder starts off with this really thought-provoking lesson. Do not obey in advance. Now, what does he even mean by that?
So he's talking about this thing called anticipatory obedience. And it's this subtle but dangerous thing where people basically start changing their behavior to fit what they think a repressive government wants, even before any rules are actually in place.
Oh, I see. So like self-censoring,
Exactly.
not rocking the boat?
Yeah, they don't challenge things. They go along with stuff even if it feels wrong. And
Wow.
they basically give away their power little by little out of fear.
Yeah, and I can see how that would just make things snowball so quickly.
Right.
Like once people start accepting those small compromises,
It becomes the new normal.
it's like a slippery slope, right?
Exactly. And it can happen so fast.
Does Snyder give any examples of how this has played out in history?
Oh, yeah. He gives a bunch of chilling examples.
Okay.
One that really stuck with me was Austria in 1938, right before the Nazis took over.
Oh, wow.
So you had these local Austrian Nazis who started harassing Jewish people, making them scrub streets, stealing their property. Yeah, it was horrible. And the really scary part is that lots of non-Nazis just stood by.
Really?
Yeah, some even joined in the looting.
Wow. And this wasn't the government ordering it yet, but people were already acting like it was the norm.
That's a powerful example of how quickly things can shift, and it makes you think right.
Totally.
Like, have I ever gone along with something at work or in my friend group, even though it felt wrong, just to avoid making waves?
Oh, yeah, all the time.
It's almost like a milder version of what happened in Austria.
Exactly. And Snyder brings up this really famous psychology experiment, too.
Okay.
The Milgram experiment.
Yeah, oh yeah, I remember that from psych class.
Yeah, so basically, ordinary Americans were told to give electric shocks to someone else. And they thought they were real harmful shocks just because a guy in a lab coat told them to.
Oh man, that experiment always freaks me out a little bit.
It is pretty disturbing.
So it shows how strong that pull of authority can be, even when we know something's not right.
Even when our gut is telling us, hey, this is wrong,
Yeah, exactly.
we still have this tendency to obey.
Okay, so if we're not supposed to obey in advance, what should we be doing?
Well, that leads us to lesson 2.
Which is defend institutions.
Okay, interesting.
Snyder's really big on this.
Okay.
He sees institutions like courts, the free press, even labor unions as these pillars that hold up a free society.
I can see that, yeah.
But they're not magic. They
Yeah.
need people to actively defend them.
It's easy to just assume someone else is taking care of it,
Right.
and then things can fall apart without you even realizing it.
Exactly. And he uses the example of some German Jews after Hitler took power.
Sure.
They thought, hey, we have these established institutions, they'll protect us.
Makes sense.
But those institutions crumbled because people didn't fight hard enough to preserve them.
Wow.
It's a tragic lesson about not being complacent
Yeah.
and assuming that everything's just going to be okay.
So we can't just take our freedoms for granted.
We can't.
We have to be active in protecting them.
And that brings us to the danger of the one-party state, right?
Okay, so that's lesson 3.
Yep.
Beware the one-party state.
It sounds dramatic, but
Yeah.
it's a real threat.
So what's Snyder's point here?
He's saying that democracies are fragile.
Okay.
And when a single party grabs all the power, especially if they have extreme views,
Right.
they can crush opposition and basically rewrite the rules of the game.
And we've seen this happen throughout history, right?
Oh, yeah. He gives a bunch of examples from Europe in the 20th century. It's
Wow.
like Hitler's Germany, Stalin's Soviet Union.
Right.
Places where one party took control and things went very, very badly.
And he's not just talking about ancient history here, right?
No, he's not.
He even draws parallels to how things are getting super polarized in politics today.
Yeah. Scary.
It feels like people are picking sides and demonizing anyone who disagrees instead of actually talking and trying to find common ground.
Yeah, it's all about us versus them.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's not how democracy is supposed to work.
Exactly.
So what's the antidote to that kind of polarization?
Well, Snyder is a big believer in getting involved at the local level,
Okay.
voting in every election, even running for office yourself if you're up for it. He's saying, like, while we still have a functioning multi-party system, we need to make our voices heard and actually participate in democracy.
Okay, so it's not enough to just complain about things on social media. We have to actually get out there and do something.
Exactly.
Okay, so lesson 4 seems almost out there at first. Take responsibility for the face of the world.
Yeah, that one's a little more abstract.
Yeah, that's that about.
It's actually about the power of symbols and everyday actions.
Okay.
Snyder argues that these seemingly small things can have a huge impact on shaping political reality. Think about propaganda posters in Stalinist Russia, for example.
Oh,
They dehumanize certain groups, making it easier to justify persecuting them.
right.
Or how about the yellow stars Nazis forced Jewish people to wear?
Oh, yeah.
It was a symbol that marked them out, made them targets.
It's terrifying how something as simple as a symbol can be used to incite hate and violence. And honestly, it makes me think about the things I share online are my posts, even the funny memes, accidentally contributing to a harmful narrative or stereotype.
That's exactly the kind of reflection Snyder is encouraging.
Wow.
What symbols and messages are we putting out there, even unconsciously?
So it's about being mindful of the ripple effects of our actions,
Exactly.
even the ones that seem small or insignificant.
Because they might not be so insignificant after all.
Okay, shifting gears a bit.
Okay.
Lesson 5 is remember professional ethics.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
This one feels particularly relevant to our listeners who are just starting their careers.
Absolutely.
So what's the takeaway here?
Snyder reminds us that professionals like lawyers, doctors, even those in tech and finance, they all played a role in enabling some pretty horrific regimes.
Oh, wow.
It's chilling to read about how some twisted their oaths and codes of conduct to serve those in power rather than the people they were supposed to be helping.
So it's not just about being good at your job.
No, it's not.
It's about having a strong moral compass, especially when things get tough or you're pressured to compromise your values.
Exactly.
Okay, so ethical frameworks exist for a reason.
They do.
There are guardrails, especially during times of crisis.
And when we abandon those, we become complicit, even if we're not the ones giving the orders.
Heavy stuff. And speaking of heavy, lesson 6 is be wary of paramilitaries.
Okay.
Now, I don't think most of us are running into armed militias on our way to work.
Hopefully not.
But what's Snyder's point here?
His point is about recognizing when groups outside the normal police or military start getting a lot of power.
Okay.
He gives the example of the Nazi SA and SS, who started as street thugs but became the tools of terror.
Right.
When armed groups are operating without accountability, it undermines democracy and creates a climate of fear.
Yeah, and you can kind of see echoes of that today with some of the political rhetoric around, taking back the country or showing them who's in charge.
Yeah, that kind of talk is dangerous.
It can get scary when violence starts to be seen as an acceptable way to achieve political goals.
Exactly. Which is why Snyder's next lesson,
Okay.
be reflective if you must be armed, is so important.
Okay.
It's directed at people in the police and military, urging them to think critically about the orders they're given and to be prepared to say no to injustice.
Yeah, we've seen throughout history how both regular police and military have been complicit in terrible things just following orders.
Right.
Snyder's arguing that individuals, especially those with weapons, have a huge responsibility to develop that inner moral compass.
To know when to say no.
Yeah, and that takes courage.
It does.
And that courage is what his next lesson is all about.
Lesson 8.
Stand out.
I'll love this one.
Okay, I like this one too. It's a call to resist conformity, even when it feels awkward or uncomfortable.
Yeah.
He talks about Winston Churchill standing up to Hitler when so many others wanted to appease him.
Talk about standing outright.
Right.
I mean, he was like a lone voice in the wilderness at first.
Yeah, and it's not just about grand gestures like that.
No, it's not.
Snyder tells the story of Teresa Prekarowa, this young woman in Poland, who risked her life to help Jewish people escape the Warsaw Ghetto during World War II.
Oh, yeah. She's amazing.
She saw what was happening and chose to act even though it was incredibly dangerous.
So inspiring.
It's incredibly inspiring, and it shows that courage doesn't always have to be on a huge scale.
It doesn't.
What can we do in our everyday lives to stand out, even in small ways?
That's the question.
What if speaking up at a meeting
Yeah.
or refusing to participate in office gossip is its own act of courage?
Totally.
It's about those little moments where we choose to do the right thing even when it's hard.
Yeah, those are the moments that define us.
Okay, so that's standout.
Uh-huh.
Lesson 9 is be kind to our language.
Ooh. Now this one might seem a bit random.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
How does this tie into resisting tyranny?
Well, Snyder makes a really compelling case for how language is manipulated by totalitarian regimes to control how people think.
Oh, okay, so it's about propaganda and thought control.
Exactly.
He's drawing on the work of Victor Klemperer,
Yeah.
who studied how the Nazis twisted language to normalize extremism.
Right. They used euphemisms. They created new words. They basically hijacked language to serve their own agenda.
And it's scary how subtle shifts in the words we use can actually erode critical thinking
It can.
and make horrific things seem acceptable.
Totally. And this isn't just a history lesson.
Right.
Think about how terms like fake news or enemies of the people are being thrown around today.
Yeah.
It's a way to shut down debate and make anyone who disagrees seem like the enemy.
So Snyder's encouraging us to be really mindful of the language we use.
And the language used around us
Right.
to be critical thinkers, to not just accept things at face value.
He even suggests reading widely to build up our vocabulary, which makes sense.
It does.
The more words and ideas we're exposed to, the better we'll be at spotting manipulation and forming our own opinions.
Exactly. It's like giving ourselves a mental toolbox to dismantle propaganda.
I like that analogy.
And that brings us to lesson 10, which feels especially relevant today. Believe in truth.
Okay, so this is about fighting against what some call post-truth,
Exactly.
where facts are basically ignored in favor of emotions and spectacle.
Yeah. It's like we're living in a world where everyone has their own version of reality, and it's hard to know what to believe anymore.
Right.
Snyder draws some chilling parallels between this and how fascist regimes operated.
Okay.
They weren't interested in truth, just in creating their own version of reality.
And he outlines 4 ways truth gets destroyed.
He does.
It's scary how recognizable they are in the world today.
Yeah, it's like he was writing about our current moment, even though the book came out a few years ago.
So what are those 4 ways?
Okay, so first you have the outright denial of facts.
Okay.
Lies are presented as truth, and any evidence to the contrary is dismissed as fake news or whatever.
Right, so it's just straight up lying.
Basically.
Okay, what's the second way?
The second way is the constant repetition of slogans and talking points, regardless of whether they're true.
Okay, so it's like if you say something often enough.
People will start to believe it.
Yeah, I've definitely fallen for that one myself.
We all have.
Okay, what's next?
Next comes magical thinking,
Magical thinking. Okay.
where contradictions are ignored and impossible promises are made.
So it's all about emotion and belief, not logic or evidence.
Exactly.
And finally,
Misplaced faith.
okay,
Blindly believing in a leader who's seen as infallible, even when they're clearly in the wrong.
it's like putting all your eggs in one basket and then being surprised when the basket breaks.
Right, and then wondering why everything's falling apart.
It's a recipe for disaster, and it's happening all around us,
It is.
which is why Snyder's next lesson is so crucial.
Lesson 11.
Investigate.
Yeah.
He's basically saying, don't just accept what you're told, do your own research.
Support investigative journalism.
Okay.
Learn how to spot propaganda and disinformation.
It feels overwhelming sometimes,
It does.
with so much information flying around.
Yeah.
But he's reminding us that we all have the power to be critical thinkers,
We do.
to question what we see and hear, and to seek out reliable sources.
Especially online, where anyone can say anything and make it look legit.
Now, this next one might seem out of place,
It does.
but it's actually one of my favorites.
Me too.
Lesson 12. Make eye contact and small talk.
So simple, but so profound.
Yeah, it seems kind of random after all that heavy stuff about tyranny.
It does.
What's the connection?
Snyder's point is that during times of political turmoil, maintaining human connection is more important than ever.
Okay, I can see that.
He shares stories from people who lived through totalitarian regimes,
Oh, wow.
and they talk about how small gestures of kindness, like a smile or a simple hello, help them get through it.
It's a reminder that even when things are falling apart around us, those little acts of human connection can help us stay grounded and remember our shared humanity.
Exactly.
It's like a little spark of hope in a dark time.
It is, and sometimes those small connections can lead to bigger acts of collective action, which is what Lesson 13 is all about.
Okay.
Practice corporeal politics.
Now, I have to admit, I had to look that one up.
I did too.
Corporeal just means relating to the body. So what's he getting at here?
It's about the importance of physical presence,
Okay.
of actually showing up in person.
Hmm.
Think about protests, marches, rallies. It's
Okay.
about being there, making your voice heard, and showing solidarity with others.
So it's not enough to just retweet something or sign an online petition.
No, sometimes you got to get out there and put your body on the line.
He uses the example of the solidarity movement in Poland, where people from all walks of life came together in public spaces to challenge the communist regime.
Yeah, that was a powerful example of people power.
It was a powerful demonstration of the power of collective action.
It was, and it's a reminder that change doesn't just happen online.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to get out there, put your body on the line, and be a physical presence in the fight for your freedoms.
And that's a lot easier to do when you feel like you have some control over your own life, which leads us to lesson 14.
Establish a private life.
Okay, so this one's all about protecting your personal privacy, especially in a world of constant surveillance and data breaches.
Yep.
Snyder provides practical tips for safeguarding your digital privacy.
Like being careful about what information you share online and who you share it with.
I think for our listeners who are building their careers and online presence, this is super relevant.
Oh, yeah, totally.
It's easy to get caught up in the hustle and overshare.
And then regret it later.
But Snyder's arguing that when we give away our privacy, we give away a piece of our power.
It's about setting boundaries,
Yeah.
taking control of your own data, and recognizing that your personal life is something you have a right to protect.
And speaking of taking control, lesson 15 encourages us to
Contribute to good causes.
I love this
It's
one.
a good one.
It's about putting your money where your mouth is, so to speak.
Exactly.
Supporting organizations that align with your values.
Whether it's fighting climate change, promoting social justice, or whatever you're passionate about.
He's saying that being a good citizen isn't just about paying taxes and voting.
No, it's not.
It's about actively participating in making your community and the world a better place.
And it's especially important for young people who are just starting to figure out what they care about and how they want to make a difference.
Absolutely. Your time, your skills, even a small donation can make a big impact.
Every little bit helps.
Okay, on to lesson 16. Learn from peers in other countries.
Ooh, yeah, this one's important.
This one feels particularly relevant in a globalized world.
It does.
So what's Snyder's message here?
He stresses the importance of listening to people from different cultures and backgrounds, especially those who've lived under authoritarian regimes.
Okay.
They have valuable insights and strategies for resisting oppression that we can learn from.
It's a reminder that the struggles for freedom and democracy aren't confined to one country.
Nope, they're happening all over the world.
And we can all learn from each other's experiences.
Exactly. It's like, why reinvent the wheel when someone else has already figured out a better way to build it?
I love that analogy, and it's a good reminder to get out there and see the world.
It is.
To experience different cultures and perspectives firsthand.
Yeah, travel is a great way to broaden your horizons and challenge your own assumptions.
Absolutely.
Okay, ready for lesson 17?
Hit me with it.
Listen for dangerous words.
Okay, what's he talking about here?
Snyder warns about how authoritarian leaders misuse terms like extremism and terrorism to silence their critics and justify cracking down on dissent.
It's like they're creating this us versus them mentality where anyone who disagrees with them is labeled an enemy.
Exactly, and it's a dangerous game.
It is.
It's important to be aware of how language is being used to manipulate us.
To make us afraid of the other.
Right, and to justify all sorts of abuses of power.
And that leads us to lesson 18.
The penultimate lesson.
Be calm when the unthinkable arrives.
Ooh, this one's a bit ominous.
It is. What's he getting at here?
This is about how authoritarian leaders exploit moments of crisis or terror to erode democratic institutions and freedoms.
Okay, so they use fear and chaos to their advantage.
Exactly.
He gives examples like the Reichstag fire, which Hitler used as an excuse to suspend civil liberties in Germany.
Right, or how Putin rose to power in Russia by playing on people's fears after a series of terrorist attacks.
So it's a reminder that fear can be a powerful tool for manipulation.
It can.
And we need to be careful not to let our fears be exploited.
We do.
He's not saying we shouldn't be concerned about real threats.
No, of course not.
But rather that we need to think critically and not give up our freedoms in exchange for a false sense of security.
Exactly. Fear can make us do irrational things.
Okay, that was a lot to take in.
It would.
We've covered the first 18 lessons from On Tyranny, and it's been quite a journey.
It has.
It's clear that Snyder's book is full of insightful and practical advice for navigating today's world.
And, you know, it's empowering, not discouraging. Snyder's giving us tools to recognize threats to our freedoms, but he's also highlighting the many ways we can resist, both individually and collectively.
I especially appreciate how he encourages us to find our own ways to resist, to be creative, and use our unique skills and talents to make a difference.
It's not a one-size-fits-all approach.
Right. And it's a message that resonates strongly with young people who are just starting to find their place in the world.
You have a voice, you have power, and you have the potential to make a real impact. You know, it's striking how Snyder connects these historical lessons to our lives today. We've been talking about the erosion of democracy, the dangers of propaganda, but he also offers hope.
That's what I love about this book. It's not just a doom and gloom history lecture. It's actually a call to action.
Exactly. And that brings us to lesson 19. Be a patriot.
Okay, this one feels a bit tricky in our current political climate, where patriotism can be such a loaded term. What does Snyder mean by it?
He's talking about a deeper kind of patriotism, not blind allegiance to a party or a leader, but love for your country that makes you want to make it better, to uphold its ideals, even when it's messy or uncomfortable.
So it's about holding our leaders accountable, speaking out against injustice, even when it's unpopular.
Exactly. Snyder argues that true patriots are willing to criticize their country because they care so deeply about it. They understand that dissent isn't disloyalty. It's actually essential for a healthy democracy.
That's a powerful way to look at it. It's not about waving flags and chanting slogans. It's about actively working to make your country live up to its highest principles.
And that requires courage, which brings us to Snyder's final lesson: be as courageous as you can.
This one feels both inspiring and daunting. I mean, most of us aren't going to be leading revolutions or facing down dictators. What does everyday courage look like?
Snyder's point is that courage takes many forms. It can be as simple as speaking up when you see something wrong, refusing to participate in harmful gossip, or defending someone who's being bullied.
It's about finding that inner strength to do what's right, even when it's hard or scary. Like Teresa Prekarowa, risking her life to help others during the Holocaust. It's a reminder that we all have the capacity for courage, even in seemingly small ways.
And those small acts of courage can ripple outwards, inspiring others to do the same. It's like a chain reaction of positive change.
So we've covered all 20 of Snyder's lessons, and it's a lot to process. What are the key takeaways for our listeners, especially those who are trying to figure out how to build a good life and make a difference in the world?
I think the biggest takeaway is that we all have a role to play in safeguarding democracy and fighting against tyranny. It's not someone else's problem to solve. We can't just sit back and hope for the best.
He's giving us concrete things we can do, supporting investigative journalism, being mindful of our language, building genuine connections with people, even protecting our own privacy. These are all acts of resistance.
And he's reminding us that it's not about being perfect or having all the answers. It's about showing up, being engaged, and trying our best, even when it's hard.
I love how he encourages us to be creative and find our own ways to resist. It's not about following a set playbook. It's about using our unique talents and passions to make a difference.
And that's incredibly empowering, especially for young people who are often told they need to wait their turn or that they don't have enough experience to make a real impact.
And Snyder's saying, no, you have power and now W. Use your voice, use your skills, and get involved. And for our listeners who are specifically thinking about economic security, a lot of these lessons tie in directly.
Absolutely. When institutions are strong, when there's a free press holding power accountable, when people feel safe to speak their minds and innovate, that's the foundation for a thriving economy.
It's about creating a society where everyone has the opportunity to succeed, not just a select few. And that requires all of us to be active participants, not passive bystanders.
Well said. Now we've covered the 20 lessons, but there's one more thing Snyder emphasizes throughout the book that I think is worth highlighting.
I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
It's about the power of reading, and not just any kind of reading, but specifically engaging with literature, history, philosophy, the kind of stuff that makes you think deeply and see the world from different perspectives.
It's funny because we started this podcast by joking about being too lazy to read, but Snyder actually makes a really compelling case for why reading is so crucial, especially in the fight against tyranny.
He argues that totalitarian regimes want to control the narrative, to limit the information people have access to dumb everyone down. Reading is an act of rebellion against that. It's about expanding your knowledge, sharpening your critical thinking skills, and cultivating empathy.
He even suggests specific authors to check out: Dostoevsky, Kundera, even Harry Potter. It's a reminder that insightful stories about power, resistance, and moral choices can be found in all sorts of places, not just in dry textbooks.
And remember, Snyder was writing this book in the early days of the Trump presidency when there was a lot of anxiety about the future of democracy in America. His call to read was a direct response to that.
He's basically saying, don't let them control your mind. Arm yourself with knowledge, with the ability to think for yourself.
Exactly. And it's not just about information overload. He's talking about reading for empathy, for understanding different perspectives, for building those connections that make us less susceptible to propaganda and manipulation.
That's such a powerful point. The more we read, the more we learn, the more we connect with others, the stronger we become as individuals and as a society. We've been going deep on Timothy Snyder's On Tyranny, and it's amazing how much he packs into such a short book.
Yeah, he doesn't waste any words.
And even beyond those 20 specific lessons, there's this underlying message that really stuck with me.
What's that?
That individual choices matter more than we think, like way more.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. He argues that tyranny doesn't just appear out of nowhere.
It's not like a switch flips.
It's more like a slow creep.
Right, it creeps in gradually, often through the seemingly small choices we make or the things we fail to do.
Exactly like that anticipatory obedience we talked about, where people start conforming before anyone even forces them to.
It's like we're giving away our power little by little without even realizing it.
And it all adds up.
And he also talks about the importance of language.
Oh, yeah.
Like, words have power, and we need to be aware of how they're being used to manipulate us.
Totally. Think about all the loaded terms we hear in politics and media these days.
Oh, yeah.
Like fake news, enemies of the people, radical left, and so on.
Like they're trying to shut down critical thinking and create this atmosphere of fear and division where people are afraid to speak their minds.
Exactly.
So what's the antidote to that?
Well, Snyder's encouraging us to be critical consumers of information, to question what we hear, and to seek out diverse perspectives.
Which brings us back to that idea of reading widely, right?
It does.
It's not just about staying informed. It's about building up our mental defenses against propaganda and manipulation.
He makes a strong case for reading literature, history, philosophy, the kinds of books that challenge our assumptions and help us see the world through different eyes.
Yeah, it's like mental weightlifting for our critical thinking muscles.
I like that.
I love that he suggests Dostoevsky, Kundera, even Harry Potter.
Right.
It shows that insightful stories about power, resistance, and moral choices can come from unexpected places.
And for our listeners who are into self-improvement, that's a great takeaway.
Totally.
Feed your mind with good stuff.
Yeah.
It'll make you more resilient in the face of all the craziness in the world.
And he's also stressing the importance of building genuine connections with people, especially across political and ideological divides.
Oh, yeah, that's huge.
This is something we keep circling back to. That human connection is like an antidote to tyranny.
It reminds us of our shared humanity, even when we disagree.
And for our listeners who want stronger social ties, that's key.
Absolutely.
Make an effort to understand people who are different from you.
It'll make you a better friend, colleague, citizen.
He talks about the power of small gestures.
Yeah.
A smile, a kind word, a willingness to listen.
It's the little things that make a big difference.
These seemingly insignificant things can actually build bridges and create a sense of community, which is essential for resisting oppression.
And you know, it's not just about fighting against bad things.
Okay.
Snyder also emphasizes the importance of contributing to good causes, of making a positive impact in the world.
Like putting our energy into something that lifts us up.
Exactly. It's about taking action to create the kind of society you want to live in.
Supporting organizations that align with your values, volunteering your time, using your skills to make a difference. These are all ways to fight for freedom and justice.
And for our listeners who are concerned about economic security, think of it this way. Yeah. A fair, just, and free society is ultimately good for everyone's prosperity.
That makes sense.
It creates a more stable and predictable environment for businesses to thrive, encourages innovation, and fosters trust between people.
So it's not just about being altruistic.
No.
It's about creating a world where everyone can flourish.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up this deep dive on tyranny, I want to leave our listeners with this thought. The future is not predetermined. It's something we actively create through our choices, our actions, and our willingness to stand up for what we believe in.
So true.
Snyder's book is a powerful reminder that each of us has a role to play in shaping that future. We can choose to be passive bystanders, or we can choose to be active participants in the fight for freedom, justice, and a better world.
What will you choose?
Thanks for joining us on Too Lazy to Read.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
We hope this deep dive has given you some food for thought and maybe even inspired you to take action. Until next time, keep reading, keep learning, and keep resisting.